Hey everyone, I am super excited for this video because it's the first time I'm going to do a cooking video for you, and I decided to do a lava cake with a red molten center and a chocolate outside just for the Icelandic volcano. So let's get started. We're going to need 4 eggs. We're going to need some salt, of course, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of flour. We got some Icelandic flour here. Whatever you have, all purpose is fine. We're going to need some butter. I personally use the butter without any salt, and we're going to need some cocoa powder, as well as we're going to use white chocolate because we're going to be turning this red, so we're going to need a white chocolate instead of a dark, and then of course red food coloring. Now I'm using a gel rather than the liquid food coloring. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to use a scale, and we're going to start with the white chocolate, and we're going to need around 6 ounces of white chocolate, or 170 grams. So just put that onto your scale into a bowl that we are then after that going to add the butter into, and so the butter is 4 ounces or 113 grams. The reason I'm using a metal bowl in this case is we're going to double boil this just to melt these two together so we get a nice mixture of the butter and the white chocolate. So with that all weighed out, I'm going to move my scale from this cooktop here, put it on a pot with a little bit of water, and set the induction cooker to a high heat to get this boiling. Now it won't take long at all, and it's kind of funny that I'm using this to film when I have a stove behind me, but there we go. So with the water boiling, you want to turn it down so it's a nice simmer. We're going to be using the steam to actually melt all this. We don't want to melt it too quickly. And then just use something to stir it around so that you're mixing it in as it's melting. And the thing is this will happen fairly quickly, so you don't want to walk away. Make sure you agitate it, and as I said, the steam is going to do all the work. You don't want the bowl sitting in the water or touching the bottom. As you can see here, it's starting to melt. Things are looking pretty good. It will in a second look like it's going to start breaking and things are going to start separating. Do not worry about that, as it's totally normal for white chocolate to do this, and you'll see right here it looks like a mess. It looks like you have just broken this whole recipe and everything has gone wrong, but I promise you, stick around, you'll see exactly what I mean when this is all going to come together, and it's going to work out just fine. So just keep with it. The chocolate's melted, the fat has separated, totally fine. Once that happens, take it off of the heat, just wipe the bottom of the pot, and then give it a stir with your spatula or what do you have, just to kind of make sure that everything is melted and you're not missing anything. You can see there, it's nice and smooth, the chocolate, but the fat has separated. Again, totally fine. This will come together, I promise you. So with that out of the way, we're going to put that off to the side, and we're going to move on to the next most important part, and that is going to be using the eggs. Now I'm using a glass bowl here just so it's easy for you to see. And for this, we're going to need 2 whole eggs. So I'm going to crack those in. I'm cracking it on a flat surface rather than the bowl, just because, I mean, I'm looking at a lot of videos, everyone's saying to do that so you don't get any eggshells in the actual bowl. I've never had that happen, but I do find it pretty easy to just crack it onto the surface. The other thing that we're going to need is 2 egg yolks. Now what I do is I use these Tupperware containers and I just crack the eggs straight into there. And with that out of the way, then it's very easy for me to just sort of reach in, grab the yolks with my clean hands and pop those in, and that way I'm not accidentally breaking the yolks and it's separate from the rest of the recipe. So it's a quick way to do it. I know there's some other tips that people have seen with water bottles. If you have any good ways of separating this, let me know, because I'm always on the lookout for that. So then what I like to do is just sort of break up the yolks and give it a quick whisk before we move on to adding the rest of the ingredients. Now what we're going to need is some sugar, and for this we're going to use 1/4 cup of sugar. So just go ahead and put that right in with your eggs. The other thing that we're going to need after this is we're going to need a pinch of salt. So it depends on your preference. I would say it's probably around 1/2 teaspoon or so. I'm just eyeballing it and putting it in, maybe about 1/2 teaspoon. You can put in a little bit more if you want, or a little bit less. It's totally fine. Then what you want to do is start whisking this all together very vigorously, because what we want is we want these yolks to turn from this dark yellow into a light fluffy color. Now I realized I shouldn't be doing this by hand, so I grabbed my electric whisk and just let that do the work, because it will take a few seconds with the electric whisk, But if you're doing it by hand, it's going to take quite a bit of time to get to the color that you see here. As you can see, it is nice, pale yellow, desaturated looking. There's a lot of air in there, and that's exactly what you want. So with that, we got the eggs there. We want to take all of that chocolate and butter, and we want to mix that together. But before we do that, what we want to do is add a little bit of that food coloring into this egg mixture. Now, how much you actually want to use is up to you. I just estimated, did a whisk, and take a look at the color and see if that's how vibrant or whatever color you want it to be. So you can see here, it doesn't take much of this gel food coloring to make a big difference. I wanted this to be really vibrant red, a really red lava coming out of these cakes. So I wanted to use quite a bit. I wouldn't be able to tell you, maybe it was a quarter of a teaspoon of this gel food coloring, maybe a little bit less. But again, you don't need much. If you only have the food coloring drops, that's totally fine, but you might need to use a little bit more than with the gel stuff. So with that, then we're going to take all of this chocolate and butter that's been melted together and separated, unfortunately, pour that into your egg, sugar, salt mixture. Now it's going to look like it's clumped together and it's not going to come together, but as I said earlier, this will all come together into a nice, smooth harmony of delicious chocolate, butter, sugar mix. The eggs are going to help absorb everything and fuse everything together. So you can see after a quick whisk, maybe around a minute or so, things start come back together. Nice and smooth. So with that out of the way, we're going to need 2 tablespoons of flour. Again, any type of flour that you have lying around is probably going to be fine. I'm using an all-purpose flour. And here in Iceland, there's different percentages, but if you're in North America watching this, then all-purpose flour is going to be just fine. You can use a cake flour if you want, and that will work great as well. So you want to stir this with your whisk, or you can use a spatula, and you want to make sure that all of the flour has been incorporated and that there's no lumps at this point. With that, we can take the whisk, put that aside, take our bowl, put that aside, and we want to move on to the actual ramekins. Now, an important thing is I have my oven preheated behind me to 450 Fahrenheit or 230 degrees centigrade. So you want to have that going. So what we want to do with these ramekins now is we want to take a little bit of butter and butter the inside of each of these. Now this recipe will work with between 6 to 8 ramekins. I'm using 6, there was a little bit left over. But you want to make sure that it's well buttered on the inside. I just use my hands, it's totally fine, but then you're going to need to wash your hands afterwards because there is a lot of fat. So with that out of the way, what we want to do now to get that chocolate outside, because this mixture is so red, it's almost like a red velvet cake, we want to use cocoa powder to get that chocolate flavor and that outside. So what I do is I put some cocoa powder into each of these ramekins, just a little bit, and then what you want to do is slowly turn them so that this cocoa powder sticks to the butter and completely surrounds the interior of the ramekin. Doesn't take that long. Cocoa powder is kind of messy, so what I do is when I'm doing it, I make sure to have this cocoa powder fall into the next ramekin so that I don't waste anything. Then we just simply place all of the ramekins on a baking sheet, get those ready, and then take the mixture and fill each ramekin 3/4 of the way up. Doesn't take much. They will grow because of the amount of eggs that is in this recipe. So don't worry. You can put it a little bit higher if you want, but you don't usually want these to go much higher up after they bake than the actual top of the ramekins, because we're going to be inverting these at the end. So once those are all done and you realize that you didn't measure these correctly and the first few needed a little bit more and the second one needed a little bit more as well, just go ahead and even those all out. You want them to be very, very close to the same amount in each ramekin so they all bake at the same rate. What we're going to do now is take this whole baking sheet, put it into the oven. Again, that's 450 Fahrenheit or 230 Celsius. And we're going to bake these for around 11.5 minutes. Now, they are very tricky, and we're going to take a look at the end of the video what happens when you slightly underbake them or slightly overbake them. And we're talking 30 seconds to a minute on either overbaking or underbaking. These are really picky on how long it is. Take those out of the oven. We're going to let them cool, but what you want to do is give them a little bit of room around each ramekin to cool so the air can go around them and then all clustered together. So what I'm doing is I'm just using the oven mitt so I don't burn myself and just giving them a little bit of space for that air to move around them. So in terms of cool down time, you probably only need around 5 minutes, maybe not even that. Just long enough so that the ramekins, if you touch them with your bare hands, are not going to burn you. Now, they are going to still be hot, so depending on your tolerance for heat, maybe you just want to use a kitchen towel to invert these, but I'm used to it. So we have these cooled down after around 5 minutes. Use a knife and gently go around the very outside of the ramekin to loosen the cake from the ramekin edges itself. You don't have to be too careful with these. They should be cooked on the outside. And as you will notice, they should be a little bit jiggly in the center if you were to touch it. So you shouldn't be able to break them just by going around the outside. Once you have that, take a small dish, put it on top, and quickly invert it. And hoping everything looks good, then you pull up the ramekin and wait for the big reveal of the cake not falling out. So if this happens, it's no big deal. You just take your knife again. This happened so many times when I was filming this that sometimes they're a little bit hard to get out, and you just wonder where you went wrong in life that this is happening, and then pops out. So there you have it. One thing to make the presentation even better, if you have whipped cream, you can use that. If you have ice cream, I just like a little bit of powdered sugar, which I'm just sprinkling over the top to make it look really, really nice. The nice thing I like about these cakes is it has that red lava look, but it also has that dark chocolate sort of speckled around the whole thing. I think it looks fantastic. But let's see how it looks when we cut into it. You can see here, a little bit difficult to cut it towards the camera, but you want that nice soft gooey center and then have the edges very cooked. The thing that I love about lava cakes is the taste. If you've never made one with white chocolate, it's a little bit different than you might be used to, but that's a really good thing. It is very, very rich. I mean, obviously it's just butter, chocolate, sugar, and there's just a little bit of flour, and of course the eggs holding it all together. So these are very, very rich, but it is absolutely delicious. You can see how the inside is just barely cooked. Got that nice, I would say it's like a creamy inside, very delicate flavors. The edges cooked perfectly, so it's a nice moist cake. Probably one of the best lava cakes I've made. And it looks fantastic, especially if you're looking for something that has this red interior and then this outside that has this darker earth kind of chocolate look to it. Really, really good tasting. I think next time, maybe a little bit of whipped cream, maybe a little bit of ice cream, or even whipped cream and then a few raspberries on top. I think that would work phenomenal with this. As you can see, I liked it so much I just ate the whole thing. But here we have another one which I overbaked, and this one was, I think it was around 12 minutes that I cooked this one, maybe 12 and a half minutes, and you can see it is just too solid. Here's an underbaked one. Looked really, really cool because of the way that it was so molten lava coming out. But you can see how easily it is to mess these things up with regards to timing. If you are worried about the center not cooking or not being sort of this molten lava feel to it, you can take a little bit of the inside, a little bit of that dough that you've sort of made with the eggs and the flour, put it in the fridge or freeze it so you have a little bit that's uncooked inside of it. But again, 11 minutes is usually just enough. Here's the final one. For the picture, of course, it looked great. It's the lava interior was flowing out perfectly, and Yeah, it just tastes delicious. I hope you all try to make this. If you've ever made a red lava cake, let me know in the comments. If you have any tips for me on making this better, I'm not a chef. This is just sort of what I do for fun. So if there's tips on baking lava cakes to perfection every single time, put that in the comments, because I'm sure both myself as well as anyone watching this would love to know. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making these. I'm very inspired by the Icelandic eruption that's going on right now, and I wanted to try and come up with a lava cake that had this red interior, but then also had this nice chocolatey exterior, so that when you cut into it, the red lava flowed out. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay updated on everything that we're doing, be sure to subscribe. And I want to say a big thank you to all those members of the channel who help support the channel and bringing better and better content to you each week.